He laughed as if my existence was nothing more than an experiment gone wrong. I wanted to slap him across the face, but the sting in my chest was sharper than any hand could deliver. New York winters had a way of biting through even the thickest coats, but the cold that day came from inside me. I had signed a deal, one I thought would be transactional, clinical, without any trace of humanity. But now, standing in front of him, the so-called alpha whose shadow stretched far longer than the skyscrapers behind him, I realized how wrong I was. Dr. Nathaniel Cross was not the kind of man anyone defied. He was brilliant, feared, untouchable. His medical lab was the place where promises and threats merged into the same sterile corridors. And I, Elliot, a man who never belonged in that world of glass walls and white coats, had been dragged into it, shackled by desperation. When he first offered the deal, his tone was chillingly simple. "You're just the vessel, nothing more." His words carved into me, leaving no room for hope. I told myself I could handle it, that being nothing was safer than dreaming of being something to him. But life, with its cruel sense of irony, had other plans. I still remember the sterile smell of antiseptic mixing with the faint hum of machines. That was where it all began, my body reduced to a function, my worth calculated in terms of DNA and biology. He stood there, detached, his hands folded neatly behind his back, his gaze clinical. I hated him then. I hated the way his eyes never softened, the way his lips pressed into a line as if every word was a verdict. Yet, beneath the harsh fluorescent lights, there were moments when I caught something in him he didn't want me to see. A hesitation, a flicker, like a man who had built his fortress so high he forgot there might still be a door hidden somewhere. I should have ignored it. But the cruelest part of being human is that we see ghosts where there are none. The first time I felt the child stir inside me, I broke. Not from fear, but from something deeper, in understanding that this wasn't just a deal anymore. This was life. Fragile, terrifying, beautiful life. And in that moment, I realized I was no longer alone. That's when Nathaniel began to change. At first, it was subtle. He lingered longer in the room. He asked questions not about numbers or medical conditions, but about how I was sleeping, if I felt cold, if I needed anything. His eyes, once sharp like scalpels, began to soften, though he tried to mask it. I hated that I noticed, because the truth was, every part of me wanted to hate him. Every reminder of his arrogance, his power, his manipulation. It should have been enough to build a wall. But the wall cracked the night he stood outside my door, drenched from the rain, and asked, not ordered, but asked if I could let him in. And I did. God help me, I did. He sat in silence for what felt like hours, his hand tightening around a glass of untouched whiskey. Then, in a voice stripped of all armor, he whispered, "I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to be anything but what I've been." I should have sent him away. Instead, I saw him, not the alpha, not the scientist, just a man who was as lost as I was. But seeing him didn't make things easier, because love born out of cruelty and contracts is the kind of love that carries scars. And every time he touched me, gentle now, almost reverent, I felt the echo of those first cold words. "You're just the vessel." The irony? The child he had once considered an experiment was now the very bond pulling us closer. I would lie awake at night, his steady breath beside me, and wonder, was I falling for him, or was I falling for the way he looked at the child inside me? The difference mattered. And yet, as his hand pressed against mine over the swell of my stomach, as his voice cracked when he said, "I want to protect you both," I knew the truth didn't matter anymore. We were already bound by blood, by fear, by something terrifyingly close to love. But in America, nothing stays hidden for long. Not secrets, not scandals, not forbidden love stories born in sterile labs and blooming in rain-soaked nights. And soon, the world outside those glass walls would come crashing in. And when it did, we would have to choose. Cling to the cold deal that started it all, or risk everything for the fragile, imperfect love that might just save us. It started with whispers. In a city like New York, nothing remains private for long, not affairs, not scandals, and certainly not the strange arrangement between a powerful alpha doctor and a man no one could quite place. First, I ignored it. What was gossip to me? I was already a walking scandal, my body the living evidence of a deal most people wouldn't believe even if they saw it with their own eyes. But the whispers grew louder, sharp enough to pierce the fragile cocoon Nathaniel and I had built behind locked doors. "They're saying you've lost control," I told him one evening as he sat hunched over the desk in his penthouse, a place too pristine for the mess of emotions between us. He didn't look up. His fingers tightened around the pen he held, snapping it in two with a sharp crack. Ink bled onto the paper like a wound. "They can say whatever they want," he muttered, though his jaw was tight, but I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. Nathaniel Cross, the man who controlled everything, was losing control. Not of his lab, not of his empire, but of me, of US, of the child that shouldn't have existed and yet was growing stronger with every heartbeat. I shifted uncomfortably on the couch, pressing a hand to my stomach. The baby kicked, a reminder that time was running out. Soon the secret wouldn't just be whispered, it would be undeniable. "You think you can hide forever?" I asked quietly. He finally looked at me then, and I almost wished he hadn't. His eyes were dark, stormy, haunted by something deeper than gossip. "I don't care about forever," he said. "I care about keeping you safe." Safe? I almost laughed, the bitterness rising in my throat. Safe from what, Nathaniel? From the world? Or from yourself? The silence that followed was heavier than any answer. The night it all shattered came like a scene ripped from a nightmare. I was walking home from the corner store just a block from his penthouse, foolishly thinking I could move through the city unnoticed when headlights blinded me. A black SUV screeched to a halt, and before I could scream, hands grabbed me, pulling me inside. The world tilted. Panic clawed at my throat. My arms flailed. My voice broke, but they didn't care. They were efficient, merciless. By the time the blindfold was ripped off, I was in a room I didn't recognize. Dark, damp, the smell of mildew clung to the air. And in front of me stood a man whose face I had only seen in news articles, Marcus Hale, Nathaniel's rival, another alpha whose empire thrived on tearing others down. "So," Marcus said, circling me like I was prey, "you're the secret, the vessel, the scandal that could ruin him." His smile was sharp, cruel. Fascinating. I tried to stand taller, but fear made my knees weak. "If you think hurting me will destroy him, you're wrong." He chuckled, low and amused. "Oh, I'm not going to hurt you. I'm going to expose you. The world loves a good tragedy, don't they? And nothing's more tragic than a powerful man brought to his knees by the thing he swore was just a tool." I froze. The words were knives because they were true. Nathaniel had called me a tool once, just a vessel. And now Marcus planned to use me the same way, weaponized, objectified, stripped of dignity. For the first time, I wondered if Nathaniel would even come for me, or if I was still just a deal he regretted making. But hours later, when the door slammed open and Nathaniel stormed in like a force of nature, I had my answer. "Touch him," he snarled at Marcus, "and I'll end you." The fight that followed was chaos. Shouts, fists, threats like venom in the air. I don't remember all of it, the way Nathaniel's arms closed around me, pulling me close, shielding me as if I was the only thing that mattered. For the first time, I believed him. Back at the penthouse, the storm inside us was louder than the one raging outside. "You shouldn't have risked yourself," I whispered, tears blurring my vision. "I'd risk everything," he said without hesitation, his voice breaking in a way I had never heard before. "For you. For both of you." And then, for the first time since this nightmare began, I let myself collapse against him. My tears soaked his shirt, his hands trembled against my back, and between us, the child kicked alive, real, undeniable. We stayed like that for what felt like forever, two broken men clinging to something fragile and terrifyingly beautiful. But even in that moment of tenderness, I knew the battle wasn't over. The world would come for us again. Society wasn't ready for love like ours, for a story born of cold deals and rewritten by something as reckless as love. And the cruelest part? I wasn't sure if we were ready either. Weeks passed, each day heavier than the last. Reporters circled like vultures. Protests sparked outside the lab. Words like unnatural and abomination painted across banners that cut into me deeper than knives. Nathaniel tried to shield me from it all, but I felt it anyway. Every insult, every threat, every reminder that our love, our child, was something the world wanted to erase. You can't fight everyone, I told him one night as we lay in the dark, my head against his chest. I don't have to fight everyone, he whispered, pressing a kiss into my hair. I just have to fight long enough for us to survive. But survival wasn't enough anymore. I wanted more. I wanted to live. I wanted to love without fear, without shame. And maybe, just maybe, I wanted to believe that even a man as broken as Nathaniel could learn how to love, not because of what he stood to lose, but because of what he could gain. The child inside me deserved nothing less. And so, I decided that no matter what the world threw at us, I would not let fear define us. Because this was no longer just his story or mine. It was ours. And we were going to write the ending ourselves. The following weeks were a slow, careful dance between exposure and secrecy. Every glance Nathaniel threw at me felt both possessive and haunted, a reflection of the alpha who had once considered me nothing more than a tool. But the man I saw now was complicated, was powerful, yes, but he was also fragile in ways that terrified him. At night, he would pace the penthouse, murmuring to himself, the soft clinks of glasses or the tap of his shoes against the hardwood floor punctuating the silence. Sometimes, he'd stop abruptly, staring at me like he wanted to memorize my every curve, every tremble, every sign of life growing inside me. I hated it and loved it at the same time. You're too alive, he admitted one night, voice barely audible over the rain tapping the windows. Too alive for me to just let go. I swallowed a laugh that could have turned into a sob. And yet you still want me? Yes, he said simply. And I believed him. But belief didn't erase fear. The outside world still loomed, and with it came reminders that our love was anything but simple. Nathaniel's past came crawling back like shadows at twilight. I learned things about him piece by piece, fragments that painted a picture of a man shaped by loss, control, and a relentless desire to dominate every facet of his world. His family, once so powerful, had abandoned him. Betrayal had scarred him, leaving him to rely on logic and dominance to survive. When he first confessed, sitting in the dark with the baby stirring between us, he didn't cry. He didn't apologize. He simply said, I built walls because I thought the world was cruel. And it is. But it's cruelest when you let someone in and they see all your weaknesses. I wanted to tell him that weaknesses weren't flaws, that they were what made him human. But instead, I pressed my forehead against his shoulder, letting silence speak what words could not. The social backlash escalated. Nathaniel's lab became a target for media attacks. Headlines screamed about unnatural science, moral violations, and a scandalous affair. Our faces appeared side by side, one a picture of authority, the other a vessel of controversy. We endured threats, angry calls, and even a break-in one night that left our nerves frayed. But the most painful blows were the ones we couldn't fight, the whispers of friends we once trusted, the judgment in people's eyes when we stepped out in public. You can't control them, I told Nathaniel after one particularly vicious article. You can't fix what they think of us. He gritted his teeth, jaw tight. I don't care what they think. I care about what happens to you and the baby. Everything else is noise. Even then, his words rang true. Love wasn't about being admired, it was about survival, protection, and choice. And Nathaniel had chosen. One evening, in a rare quiet moment, I watched him working over his medical notes. The light from the desk lamp cast shadows across his face, highlighting the tension in his brow. The alpha who once saw me as a tool now treated me with reverence, almost as if I were the fragile center of the universe he had never known existed. You know, I said quietly, you've changed. Maybe more than you realize. He didn't look up. I'm only changing because of you. Don't let me forget that. Don't let me slip back into the man who cared only about control. I won't, I whispered. And you won't be alone. Not ever again. The baby kicked then, almost like it agreed. Nathaniel's hand moved instinctively to my stomach, his fingers brushing over the small curve. For the first time, I saw him smile a real smile, not the practiced one of an alpha or a man in control. Yet, love, even one tested by fear and chaos, was not free from shadows. Marcus Hale had not vanished. He lurked in the background like a storm cloud, waiting for the opportunity to strike, to exploit, to ruin. And Nathaniel knew it. I'll handle him, Nathaniel assured me, though the weariness in his posture betrayed the truth. He could try, but he couldn't protect us from every threat, not from the cruelty of the world, and not from the doubt that sometimes gnawed at even the strongest hearts. That night, we lay side by side, fingers entwined, hearts racing with fear and desire. We whispered promises, fragile as glass but strong enough to hold us together. Nathaniel's hand rested on my stomach, feeling the small, relentless life growing inside me. And in that moment, I understood the child had changed everything. It had transformed our cold deal into a delicate, burning love neither of us could ignore. Weeks turned into months, each day a balance of caution and daring. Nathaniel faced his past, confronting enemies and estranged family members alike, while I navigated the world's judgment, learning to claim my space and assert our right to exist. And through it all, our bond deepened. The initial coldness, the clinical detachment, gave way to small acts of tenderness. A hand on my back, a whispered, "I love you," a shared laugh over coffee in the early morning light. We learned each other in ways that defied the world's rules. Nathaniel learned to trust, to let someone see his fragility without fear of exploitation. I learned to accept love that terrified me, love that had once been impossible, now rendered inevitable by circumstance, by desire, by a life growing between us. The day the baby was born was both terrifying and miraculous. Nathaniel was there, holding my hand as I trembled, his knuckles white with tension. The first cry was a scream of defiance, of life itself. And in that sound, every fear, every battle, every dark hour seemed to crystallize into a single, perfect moment of triumph. Nathaniel kissed my forehead, his lips lingering, eyes wet with a mix of relief and wonder. "We did it," he whispered. "We really did it." I laughed, tears streaking my face, heart so full it ached. "Yes, we did it, and we'll do it again. Every day together." For the first time in years, Nathaniel allowed himself to be vulnerable, to love without restraint, to embrace a future he had once believed was impossible. And I, too, let myself be free from the past, from pain, from the cold contract that had begun this journey. Our story, forged in cold walls and clinical contracts, had transformed into something radiant. Love, fragile yet unyielding, had claimed us. And in the warmth of our small family, with our child nestled between us, we knew that no enemy, no judgment, no past could undo what we had found. We were not tools. We were not victims. We were something stronger, something enduring. We were love. The weeks after the birth were the most surreal I had ever experienced. Life had shifted so dramatically that the cold contract, the clinical detachment, the fear that had once dominated every corner of our lives now felt like a distant nightmare. Nathaniel and I had crossed into territory neither of us had dared to imagine: parenthood, partnership, and the quiet, miraculous moments that made all the battles worth fighting. From the moment we brought our child home, Nathaniel's behavior had transformed completely. No longer was he the untouchable, commanding alpha who measured people and outcomes with cold precision. Now he moved through the apartment with a softness I had never seen before, checking diapers with careful concentration, humming lullabies he swore he didn't know the words to, and holding the baby against his chest as if the fragile life in his arms could shatter at any wrong move. I watched him one afternoon as sunlight poured through the wide windows, the golden light catching the fine hairs on his face and the warmth in his eyes. He glanced at me and smiled, the smile of a man who had fought battles and survived, not just for himself but for the people he loved most. "You're staring," he said, a teasing lilt in his voice that reminded me how far we'd come. I can't help it, I admitted. You're incredible. And so is he. So are we, somehow. Nathaniel chuckled softly, shaking his head. We are. But don't let that fool you into thinking it's easy. Parenthood. Love. It's terrifying. Yes, I agreed. And yet, somehow, it feels like the only thing that makes sense. Outside, the city still moved at its relentless pace. The headlines that had once threatened to ruin us had grown quieter, some fading away entirely as our story became a symbol of resilience. Not everyone had embraced it, of course. Friends still judged. The world still whispered. But Nathaniel and I had learned that the only opinions that truly mattered were our own, and the life we had created together. One evening, as we walked through a quiet park with the baby nestled between us in a soft sling, I reflected on how far we'd come. The chill in the air carried hints of winter, but we were warm, wrapped in scarves and each other's presence. Nathaniel's hand found mine, and our fingers intertwined naturally, comfortably, as if they'd been meant to fit together all along. I never thought this was possible, I confessed quietly. Nathaniel squeezed my hand gently. Neither did I, but life has a way of surprising us. We fought for this, didn't we? Every sleepless night, every fear, every storm. It led us here. I nodded, feeling the small flutter of our child against my chest. He's going to know how much we love him, how much we fought for him, and he'll grow knowing that love is worth everything. Nathaniel pressed a kiss to my forehead, a silent promise of the man he was becoming. And he'll know that love can heal even the deepest scars, he murmured. There were moments when the past crept in, memories of cold rooms, whispered threats, and the alpha persona Nathaniel had worn like armor. But those moments were brief, dissolving quickly in the warmth of our current life. The man who once saw me as a vessel, a tool, had evolved into someone capable of profound tenderness, capable of love so encompassing it reshaped everything he touched. Even our most mundane routines became moments of intimacy. Nathaniel cooking breakfast while our baby dozed in a bassinet nearby, my head resting on his shoulder as he hummed softly. Laughing together as we realized we hadn't slept a full night in months but somehow felt more alive than ever. Sharing whispered conversations in the dark, our hands finding each other in ways that spoke volumes more than words ever could. It was not perfection. There were arguments, moments of fear, and insecurities that lingered, but they no longer had the power to define us. Every challenge had become an opportunity to prove that our love was stronger than any obstacle, more enduring than any past trauma, and more resilient than any external judgment. One day, as the baby cooed in Nathaniel's arms, I looked at him and realized something profound. We had not just survived, we had thrived. The cold contract, the initial detachment, the fear and manipulation, all of it had been transformed into a foundation of something beautiful and enduring. Nathaniel caught my gaze and smiled softly, the kind of smile that made the chaos of the world fade away. I never imagined that love could feel like this, he said. Not just for you, not just for him, but for us. All of us together. I nodded, tears brimming in my eyes. It's more than I ever dared to hope for, and I promise we'll keep it that way. No matter what. He leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to my lips, and then rested his forehead against mine. Our child wriggled between us, a small, perfect bundle of life and hope. In that moment, the past fell away completely, leaving only the warmth, the love, and the promise of a future we would build together. Time passed, and life settled into a rhythm that felt like magic. Our mornings were filled with laughter, our evenings with quiet reflection. Nathaniel and I discovered the joy in ordinary moments, the gentle weight of a baby in one arm, the soft brush of fingers in the late-night dark, the shared warmth of bodies curled together in exhaustion and contentment. We celebrated milestones, small and large. The first smile, the first step, the first word. Each triumph was a reminder of what we had endured and what we had built, a family that was forged not from convenience, but from choice, courage, and love that refused to be constrained by fear or judgment. Years later, I would look back on the man Nathaniel once was the alpha who saw me as nothing, the man consumed by control and fear and marvel at the journey we had taken together. Love had transformed him, as it had transformed me, and together we had created something beautiful, unshakable, and enduring. The baby, now a lively child full of curiosity and laughter, ran ahead of us in the park, Nathaniel and I following hand in hand. We watched, hearts full, knowing that every hardship, every storm, every trial had been worth this, the laughter, the warmth, and the undeniable bond of our family. Nathaniel squeezed my hand. "We did it," he whispered. "Yes," I said, smiling. "We really did it." And in the golden light of that American afternoon, with the city stretching endlessly beyond and our child laughing freely between us, I knew the truth. Love had won. We had survived the cold deals, the fear, and the pain. And in the end, we had created a life full of warmth, laughter, and a love that would endure for generations to come. We were no longer tools. We were no longer victims. We were a family. And that, finally, was everything. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.